My dear friend, let me tell you about a Tuesday afternoon that changed two lives forever. It was the summer of 1884 in Crockett Springs, Texas, back when a handshake meant something and folks helped their neighbors without being asked. You might wonder why an old storyteller like me remembers this particular day so clearly. Well, some moments burn themselves into memory like a brand on leather. This was one of those moments when a man running from his past met a woman running toward her future, right there on a dusty depot platform. Neither of them knew it yet, but the good Lord had plans for them both. Pull up a chair and pour yourself some coffee. This story needs proper telling. Morgan Wade had been counting the same fence posts for near about an hour. 27, 28, 29 along the platform's eastern edge. The numbers kept his mind from wandering to things that didn't bear thinking about, like whether he'd made the biggest mistake of his life placing that advertisement in the Matrimonial Times. The telegram in his vest pocket had gone soft from handlings. Thornton, R. Tuesday, 2 p.m. The depot clock showed 17 minutes past 2. The June heat pressed down like a flat iron, making the air shimmer over the tracks. Stages ran late all the time. Wheels broke, horses went lame, rivers rose. 100 reasons for delay, each one a gift from Providence, if a man was looking for a way out. His mare, Biscuit, named by the previous owner's young daughter, stood patient as Job at the hitching rail, saddlebags packed and ready, just in case the Lord provided an escape route. Then came the dust cloud, rising beyond Cedar Hill Cemetery, where his mother's cousin lay buried these past 10 years. The familiar rattle of wheels on sun-baked ruts echoed across the prairie, followed by old Hobbs hollering at his team the way he'd done since before the war. The Sioux Line stage came barreling around the bend like Judgment Day itself. Morgan's boots seemed to grow roots right there on the platform. He couldn't move forward to greet whoever was coming, couldn't move back to his horse. Just stood there like a scarecrow in a cornfield. The stage door banged open. First came the drummer with his cases full of notions and remedies, Harry something or other from Fort Worth. Then Mrs. Doyle from the Rocking Tea Ranch, back from visiting her daughter who'd just birthed twins down Austin Way. She gave Morgan a knowing look that said the whole county knew about his mail-order bride advertisement. Then a woman's hand appeared on the doorframe. It was a working hand, no soft city gloves, no fancy rings, just honest fingers with a half-healed cut across the thumb, like she'd been gardening without proper care. The rest of her emerged into the blazing afternoon sun, gray traveling dress plain as homespun, dark hair pinned up practical under a simple straw bonnet, carpetbag mended with what looked like harness thread. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the color of good coffee with just a touch of cream, and they looked straight at him, without apology or shame. Not desperate, not defeated, just steady, like she was taking his measure the same way she'd judge a horse or a piece of land, calculating what could be done with the raw materials at hand. Morgan's boot caught on a warped board. He stumbled forward, catching himself just before making a complete fool of himself in front of half the town. Mr. Wade, her voice carried the worn smoothness of river stones, neither harsh nor sweet. Miss Thornton. The words came out rough as sandpaper. She waited, head tilted just slightly like his mother used to do when she expected better manners. Morgan remembered himself. Then he was supposed to take her bag, offer his arm, say something welcoming. Instead, he stood there gaping like he'd never seen a woman before. "I expect you have a wagon," she said finally. "Yes, ma'am. Over here." He reached for her carpetbag. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, her skin worked rough and warm despite the heat. The wagon sat in what little shade the depot provided. Morgan hefted her trunk into the bed army surplus from the look of it, with C.T. painted neat on the side. Clara climbed up to the bench seat without waiting for his help, settling her carpetbag on her lap like it held everything precious in the world. The ride to town stretched out longer than Sunday service. Morgan tried 3 times to speak about the weather, about the boarding house, about anything, but his tongue felt thick as molasses. Beside him, Miss Thornton sat straight-backed despite the heat, gripping that carpetbag like it might fly away if she loosened her hold. They passed the cemetery where cedar trees threw blessed shadows across the graves, the schoolhouse with its bell tower listing slightly to the east, the Gonzalez family's goat pen where the billy goat stood on his hind legs, watching them pass with their yellow eyes. By the time they reached Main Street, curtains were twitching in every window. Mrs. Pritchard's terrier set up a racket that started every dog in town barking. Morgan felt like he was driving a circus wagon down the street, everybody watching and judging. Holloway's boarding house sat respectable-like between the Lutheran church and Garrett's saddle shop. Mrs. Holloway emerged before Morgan could even set the brake, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. Her sharp eyes took in everything from Clara's sensible boots to the careful mending on her dress. "You'll be wanting separate rooms, I expect," Mrs. Holloway stated in that way she had that brooked no argument. "Yes, ma'am," Morgan said. Clara was already opening her carpetbag, pulling out a small leather purse, soft with age. "How much for the week?" $2 each. Includes 3 meals a day. No visitors after 9 o'clock, no spirits, no cursing. Church on Sunday is expected, but not required." And Clara counted out 4 bills, worn soft as cloth from handling. Morgan caught himself trying to count what remained in her purse. Looked like maybe $30-some. Everything she had in the world, most likely. "I'll need work," she said matter-of-fact. "Who might be hiring?" Mrs. Holloway's expression softened just a touch. "Can you write a fair hand due figures?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then we'll find you something proper." She turned to Morgan. "Supper's at 6:30 sharp. Don't be late or you'll go hungry." Inside about the boarding house smelled of linseed oil and bread baking. Mrs. Holloway showed them upstairs 2 rooms at opposite ends of the hall, just as proper as you please. Clara tested the lock on her door twice, while Morgan pretended not to notice. 3 months, she said sudden-like. "We'll try this arrangement for 3 months, then decide if it suits." Its relief washed over Morgan like cool water. 3 months wasn't forever. He could manage 3 months of anything. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Mrs. Holloway's kitchen table bore the scars of 20 years' worth of meals, knife marks, coffee rings, a burn spot shaped like Tennessee. Morgan sat on the one side, Clara on the other, with bowls of beef stew growing cold between them. The meat was tough as boot leather, but Clara cut each piece methodical-like, chewing thoroughly before swallowing. Morgan watched her jaw work, the small muscle that jumped near her ear. She ate like someone who'd known hunger, not rushing, but not leaving anything either. "The turnips are fresh," Mrs. Holloway offered from the stove where she was already starting tomorrow's bread. "From the Garrett garden." Morgan pushed the white chunks to the edge of his plate. The texture reminded him of wet newspaper, and the taste wasn't much better. Clara noticed her eyes track the movement of his spoon. "Don't care for turnips." First words she'd spoken since they'd sat down. "Never have. My mother tried every way of cooking them, but—" He shrugged without asking. Clara reached across with her spoon and transferred them to her own plate. Matter of fact, no judgment, the way a wife might, if they were really married. "My sister had 5 children, she said sudden-like, focusing on the turnips. "Eldest is 12 now, youngest just turned 3 last month." The past tense had hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. She passed 4 months back. Clara set her spoon down parallel to the plate's edge, precise as a sergeant arranging mess kit. Childbirth fever. The baby died too. Mrs. Holloway's bread kneading slowed, but didn't stop. The clock above the stove ticked on 7:13, 7:14. Her husband remarried 6 weeks later, Clara continued. His new wife made it clear I was temporary help, just until she got settled. Morgan's throat felt like he'd swallowed sand. That's hard. That's life. She picked up her spoon again, finished the last turnip. You mentioned in your letter you had tools, carpentry work. Some, enough to get by. Show me. The request caught him off guard, but he fetched his toolbox from the wagon, set it on the porch where the evening light was still good. Clara examined each tool like she was reading tea leaves, the plane with its chip on the handle. The hammer worn smooth where his palm fit, the saw that needed sharpening. These were your father's, she said, not asking. How did you— the initials, J, burned into the handles. You're Morgan. So J must be your father. James? James Wade? He hadn't said the name aloud in 2 years. Clara ran her thumb along the saw teeth, testing. A bead of blood appeared. Morning came with roosters crowing and the smell of biscuits burning. Morgan found Clara already dressed in her brown calico, standing at the kitchen window watching the sun paint Main Street gold. Mrs. Holloway had to tend her sister, Clara said without turning. Left the biscuits too long. Black smoke wisped from the edges of the oven door. Morgan grabbed a towel, pulled out the pan. The bottoms were charcoal, but the tops might be saved. He set them on the cooling rack his mother had used the same way, waste not, want not. I need supplies, Clara said. Thread, flour, basic things. Mueller's opens at 7. I know. Mrs. Holloway told me. She turned from the window. I'll go alone. Town's already talking. Might be better if you came along to protect me. She pulled on her bonnet, tied the ribbons with quick jerks. I didn't come 1,000 miles to hide. Morgan followed anyway, staying half a block behind as she walked down Main Street. The town was waking up. Sam Henderson sweeping his barbershop steps, the widow Mason hanging wash, Tom Garrett arranging bridles in his shop window. Each one stopped what they were doing to watch Clara pass. She walked like she owned the sidewalk, shoulders back, chin level. Not proud exactly, but not apologizing for existing either. The brown calico had been pressed careful, and she'd pinned her hair up neat as Sunday. Working woman's respectability, every inch of it. Muller's general store smelled like pickle brine and coffee beans, with that underlying scent of feed grain that got into the wood and never left. Clara went straight to the dry goods section. Mrs. Mueller, a thin woman who looked like she'd been pressed in a book, followed with her account ledger. You're the young woman from yesterday's stage. Miss Thornton. Clara Thornton? Yes, we heard, from Aunt Antonio. By way of San Antonio. Clara selected a spool of black thread, examined it for breaks. Originally from Ohio. The bell above the door jangled sharp. Miss Pritchard sailed in with her little rat of a dog, the one that bit children and got away with it because Mrs. Pritchard's husband owned the bank. The terrier went straight for Clara's skirts, yapping like Satan's own doorbell. Duchess, come. Mrs. Pritchard's command might as well have been spoken to the wind. The dog circled Clara, showing yellow teeth. Clara stood still as a fence post, didn't bend to pet the creature, didn't step back. Just waited. The dog finally gave up, slunk back to its owner. You must be Mr. Wade's arrangement. Mrs. Pritchard's voice could have frosted windows in July. Miss Thornton, Clara said, turning to examine the bolts of cloth. Yes, how brave of you. Coming all this way on just a promise, though I suppose when a woman reaches a certain age with certain circumstances, one can't be too particular. Clara ran her fingers along a bolt of blue gingham, testing the weave. 5 pounds of flour, please, she said to Mrs. Mueller. The cheaper kind is fine. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Pritchard continued, there's no shame in it. We can't all marry for love or position. Some of us must be practical, though I do worry about the example it sets for our young ladies, this mail-order business. So transactional. Clara selected a paper of pins, counted them through the paper. How much for the beans? 3 cents a pound? Mrs. Mueller squeaked. I'll take 2 pounds. Clara moved to the bean barrel, began scooping, 1 handful, paused to calculate. Another handful, each movement precise as a banker counting money. Of course, you'll want to attend church on Sunday. Mrs. Pritchard pressed on. We have a very respectable congregation, though I should mention we do have certain standards about dress and behavior and the company one keeps. Clara tied off the bean sack with a quick knot. I attend church when I choose to. The words dropped into the store like stones into still water. Mrs. Mueller's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. 2 other women who'd been pretending to shop near the fabric counter froze mid-reach. When you choose? Mrs. Pritchard's voice climbed an octave. My dear girl, church attendance isn't a choice. It's a Christian duty. For you, perhaps. Clara moved to the counter, began laying out her purchases. For me, faith is between myself and the Almighty, not a public performance. The terrier growled. Mrs. Pritchard's face went the color of pickled beets. Well, I never. I expect not. Clara counted out coins from her small purse. Mrs. Mueller, do you deliver? That is, we could. Never mind. I'll carry them. Morgan stepped out from behind the coffee grinder where he'd been lurking. I can help with those. Clara looked at him steady. No surprise. She'd known he was there all along. Mr. Wade? Mrs. Pritchard's tone could have curdled milk. How appropriate that you're here. Just passing by, ma'am. Yes, I'm sure. She gathered her dog's leash, wrapping it around her wrist like she was afraid of contamination. We'll be watching, both of you. This is a respectable town. She swept out, the bell jangling violent in her wake. Mrs. Mueller fumbled with Clara's purchases, dropping the thread twice. That'll be 47 cents. Clara counted out exact change, picked up her basket with both hands. The weight pulled her shoulders forward, but she didn't ask for help. Morgan took the flour sack anyway. She didn't protest. They walked back toward the boarding house in silence. But as they passed the saloon, Morgan heard his name, Tom Garrett's voice, carrying through the bat-wing doors. Got her off that stage quick enough. Bet he didn't wait for no preacher neither. Laughter from multiple throats. Mail-order bride, another voice said. More like mail order. Morgan set down the flour, pushed through the doors. The saloon was dim, smelling of spilled beer and sawdust. 4 men at the bar, Garrett, 2 cowboys from the Rocking Tea, and Sam Henderson, who should have been cutting hair. Gentlemen, they turned, guilty as boys caught stealing apples. The lady deserves respect, Morgan said, quiet. She's come here honest, looking for honest work and honest arrangement. Any man thinks different can discuss it with me. Garrett's Adam's apple bobbed. No offense meant, Morgan. Good. Morgan looked at each face in turn, because I'd hate for there to be misunderstandings. He left them standing there, pushed back through the doors. Clara waited exactly where he'd left her, holding her basket, flour sack at her feet. They'll talk anyway, she said. Maybe, but quieter. They walked the rest of the way in silence. At the boarding house gate, Clara stopped. Why did you really place that advertisement? The question caught him sideways. I told you, looking for a practical arrangement. No, men like you don't advertise unless they're running from something or toward something. She shifted the basket to one arm. Which is it? Morgan looked at this woman who'd traveled 1,000 miles on a newspaper promise. Both, I suppose. At least you're honest. She picked up the flour sack herself. Supper's at 6:30. She went inside, leaving him standing at the gate. Through the kitchen window, he watched her unpack her purchases. Methodical as always, Mrs. Holloway appeared, said something that made Clara almost smile. A normal domestic scene. Except nothing about this was normal. Not him, not her, not this arrangement they were trying to build on sand and stubbornness. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Morgan looked west to see storm clouds building, dark as bruises against the sky. Rain coming. Good for the gardens, hard on the roads. He wondered if Clara had brought an umbrella, then wondered why he cared. Through the window, she was measuring flour into a bowl. Her hands moved sure and steady, like she'd done this 1,000 times, like she belonged in that kitchen, in this town, in this life she was trying to build. Morgan turned toward the stable. Biscuit needed tending, and he needed time to think about what he was running from, about what he was running toward, about why Clara Thornton's steady gaze made him want to be both more and less than what he was. Behind him, lightning flickered in the approaching clouds. The air smelled like copper and coming rain. Something was building, something more than weather, and Morgan didn't know if he should shelter from it or stand in it and let it wash him clean. The borrowed garden plot behind the Lutheran church caught the morning sun first, before the rest of the town woke up. Morgan found Clara already there, kneeling between the rows, her gray dress dark with dew at the knees. She'd been coming here since dawn for 3 days straight, working the clay soil like she was trying to save its soul. Mrs. Mueller gave us the corner section, she said without looking up. Quarter share of whatever grows. The plot was 20 by 30 feet, fenced with cedar posts going soft with rot. Half was already worked dark soil turned and mixed with what looked like stable muck. The other half lay hard as brick, baked solid by the Texas sun. Clara had a crate beside her seeds, a trowel, strips of cloth for tying. Her hands moved through the worked soil, breaking clumps, testing moisture. The same hands that had examined his father's tools now read the earth like scripture. Too much clay, she muttered. Needs sand and more manure. Hancock might spare some from the stable. Already asked. He'll trade for vegetables come harvest. She sat back on her heels, surveyed her work. If there is a harvest. Morgan knelt beside her. The soil felt cool through his pants, darker where she'd worked compost into it. She pulled a seed packet from her crate. D.M. Ferry and Co. The paper soft with handling. Tomato seeds. The label showed red fruit bigger than fists, which seemed like wishful thinking in this soil. My mother grew tomatoes, Morgan said. Back in Kansas. Did she teach you? Tried to. I was more interested in the horses. Clara opened the packet, careful, like it held gold dust. The seeds were tiny, flat, no bigger than apple seeds. She poured 3 into his palm. Here. She took his hand, her fingers rough with callus but gentle. Thumb deep, no more. She guided his thumb into the soil, pressing down. The earth gave way, cool and damp. Her hand stayed on his, showing the depth. Her skin was warm, chapped at the knuckles from lye soap. There was dirt under her nails, and a green stain on her thumb, plant juice of some kind. Feel how it gives? She pressed slightly. Too deep, and they rot. Too shallow, and the birds take them. Morgan focused on the instruction, not on how close she was, not on the coffee and cornbread smell of her, not on the way a strand of hair had escaped her pins and hung against her neck. Now, cover, she demonstrated with her free hand, pulling the soil over the depression, gentle, like she stopped, like tucking in a child. Morgan finished. That's what my mother said, too. Clara released his hand, went back to her seeds. They worked the row in silence, developing a rhythm. Plant, cover, shift down 6 inches. Plant, cover, shift. The sun climbed, heating the back of Morgan's neck. Sweat gathered under his collar, dripped onto the dark soil. German method, Clara said suddenly. She gestured at her planting pattern, not straight rows, but clusters. Mrs. Zimmerman taught me. Our neighbor, back in Ohio, you plant companions together. Tomatoes with basil, beans with corn. Never heard of that? Most haven't. But Mrs. Zimmerman's garden fed 8 people on half an acre. Clara moved to the next section, marking it with a stick. She said, plants are like people. Some bring out the best in each other. Some bring out the worst. By the time the church bell rang 9 o'clock, they'd planted half the worked section. Morgan's back screamed from the bending, his knees soaked through with dew and dirt. Clara looked equally spent, though she didn't complain. Pump at the boarding house is acting up, she said, washing her hands in the bucket she'd brought. The water turned brown instantly. Mrs. Holloway mentioned it at breakfast. Probably the leather valves. They'd dry out in this heat. Can you fix it? If I can find leather. I saw some at Weller's, in the back, with a horse tack. They walked back to the boarding house, Morgan carrying the empty water bucket, Clara holding her seed crate. The town was fully awake now, wagons on Main Street, smoke from chimneys, the ring of the blacksmith's hammer. The pump stood in the side yard, one of those Dresden blue pitcher pumps from before the war. Morgan worked the handle. It moved too easy. No resistance, no water. He got his tools, removed the top cap. Rust flaked off, revealing the dried-out leather valve. Cracked like old boots. Clara knelt beside the toolbox, examining each tool before handing them to him. She understood the logic, what loosened, what tightened, what pried. The bottom valve was worse, leather gone to pieces. Morgan traced the old one on fresh leather from his repair kit, cutting careful with his knife. Clara held the pump shaft steady while he fitted the new valve, her grip solid, even when rust particles showered down. Turn it slow, he said. Need to seat it proper. She rotated the shaft, steady pressure, no jerking. The valve slipped into place with a soft thump that meant success. They reassembled the pump without talking, Clara anticipating what he needed. When they primed it, water gushed out brown, then clear, then cold. Morgan laughed, surprised at the sound coming from his own throat. Clara smiled, just the corners of her mouth lifting. But it changed her whole face, made her look younger, less carved from hardwood. Then she noticed the grease smear across her cheek, tried to wipe it, made it worse. Here, Morgan pulled out his kerchief, mostly clean. You've got, he gestured at her cheek. She took the cloth, scrubbed hard enough to pink her skin. Still there? Other side. She scrubbed again, missing it complete. May I? She held still while he wiped the mark away. Quick, barely touching. The grease came off, but left a shadow on her skin. Her eyes stayed on his face the whole time, reading something there. Thank you. She handed back the kerchief, now striped black. For fixing the pump. It's what I do. Yes. She stood, brushed dirt from her skirt. It is. The evening walk started without discussion. After supper, after the dishes were cleaned and put away, Morgan would find himself on the porch and Clara would appear with her shawl, and they'd walk, past the last houses where town gave way to prairie, past the cemetery where cedar trees dropped needles that crunched underfoot, out to where the only sounds were grass rustling and their own footsteps. The first night, neither spoke at all, just walked side by side, careful not to touch, while the sun painted the sky orange, then purple, then black. The second night, Clara pointed west. Venus? That's the evening star. Same thing. Venus is the evening star in the west, morning star in the east. Morgan studied the bright point of light. How do you know that? Books. My sister's husband had books. Agriculture almanacs, mostly, but some astronomy. The third night, coyotes sang somewhere beyond the last hill. Clara stopped walking to listen. They sounded close, maybe a half-months, their yipping echoing off the low clouds. Hunting, Morgan said, or celebrating. Pack animals do both. You know coyotes. I know loneliness. It sounds the same in any throat. The fourth night brought clouds from the north, covering the stars one by one. Clara walked closer to him, their arms almost touching. When she stumbled on a prairie dog hole, Morgan caught her elbow. She didn't pull away. Mrs. Templeton needs help tomorrow, she said. The banker's wife, letters and accounts. That's good work. 3 days a week, $1.50 total. She kept walking, but slower now. It's not much, but with your carpentry, we'll manage. We? She stopped, turned to face him. In the darkness, he could barely see her features. There is no we, not yet. Just two people trying an arrangement. Fair enough. They walked back in silence, but it was different from the first night's silence, fuller somehow. When they reached the boarding house gate, Clara paused. Will you walk tomorrow, even if I'm late from Mrs. Templeton's? If you want, I want. She touched his hand, quick as a bird landing and taking off. I liked the walking. Inside, getting ready for bed, Morgan could hear her through the thin wall, water splashing in the basin, the creak of floorboards as she moved about, the rustle of fabric, her dress being hung up, nightgown being put on. Then a sound he hadn't expected. Singing, soft, barely audible, but definitely singing, some hymn he half remembered from childhood. Shall we gather at the river, maybe, or in the sweet by and by. Morgan lay on his narrow bed, listening to that quiet singing. It had been 3 years since he'd heard a woman sing in the next room, 3 years since he'd left Colorado and everything that went wrong there. The singing stopped. The bed creaked as Clara lay down. Then silence. Just their breathing separated by painted boards and plaster. That's when he heard it. Clear as his own heartbeat. Footsteps on the porch below. Slow, careful, trying not to make the boards creak. Someone was outside the boarding house. Morgan sat up, reached for his boots. The footsteps moved along the porch, paused at the front door. The knob rattled, tested, then nothing. Silence stretched out, tight as fence wire. A knock came. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Morgan knew that pattern, knew who knocked that way. Jake Coulter had found him. Morgan's boots hit the floor soft as he could manage. Through the thin wall. Clara's breathing stayed steady asleep, or pretending to be. The knocking came again. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Jake's signature from the Colorado days, when they'd meet at all hours to discuss the claim. Mrs. Holloway's door opened downstairs, her voice sharp with irritation. We don't take visitors after 9 o'clock. Pardon, ma'am. Looking for Morgan Wade, urgent business. That voice. Jake Coulter, sure enough. Same Tennessee drawl that could charm birds from trees or talk a man into foolish investments. Morgan pulled on his shirt, fingers fumbling with buttons. His hands knew this feeling, the tight chest, the cold sweat, the urge to be anywhere else. He opened his door quiet as he could. Morgan, Clara's voice through the wall, alert now. Business. Go back to sleep. Her bed creaked. She was sitting up, listening. Morgan went downstairs. Jake stood in the doorway, hat in hand, playing the gentleman for Mrs. Holloway. 3 years had weathered him deeper lines around his eyes, gray threading through his beard, clothes that had seen too many miles. "Morgan?" Jake's smile hadn't changed, still wide, still false as fool's gold. "Been looking for you." "Jake," Mrs. Holloway looked between them, reading the tension. "You can talk on the porch, quietly." They went outside. The night air was thick with coming rain, clouds covering the stars Clara had named. Jake pulled out his tobacco pouch, the same leather one with the bullet hole from that mess in Leadville. "Thought you were in California," Morgan said. "Was. Then wasn't." Jake rolled his cigarette with practiced fingers. "You're hard to find, partner." "Not your partner anymore." "No, funny. I've got papers that say different." Jake lit his cigarette, the match flare showing his face clear, thinner, hungrier. But those calculating eyes unchanged, the Broken Ridge claim. "Remember?" Morgan's stomach dropped. "That claim's dead. The water rights were just awarded to us. Judge ruled last month." Jake pulled papers from inside his coat, even in the darkness. Morgan could see the official seal. $3,000 in damages. Split 4 ways, you, me, Peterson, Carlson. Peterson died. Heard about it in Denver. He did. Pneumonia. And Carlson sold me his share for whiskey money. Jake's cigarette glowed red. "Leaves you and me $1,500 each." The numbers hit Morgan like cold water. $1,500. Enough to buy land, build a real house, start proper. Enough to offer Clara something more than 3 months of maybe. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just need you to testify. Confirm the dates, the original filing. The lawyer says your testimony seals it. And if I don't?" Jake's smile faded. "Then there's the matter of the $200 you borrowed for supplies. You said, 'Cept I've got a paper says it was a personal loan." Another document appeared. "With interest. That's near $300 now." Morgan remembered signing that paper. Desperate. Sure, the claim would pay out. Young and stupid and believing Jake's promises. "I don't have $300. "Then you come to Colorado with me. Testify. Get your share. Pay me back. Pocket the rest." Jake dropped his cigarette, ground it under his boot. "Stage leaves day after tomorrow." "I need time to think. You've got until tomorrow night." Jake touched his hat brim. "I'll be at the Cattleman's Hotel, room 12. He walked away, whistling some tune from the war. Morgan stood on the porch, his mind already calculating. Colorado was 5 days by stage. The hearing, maybe a week. 2 weeks total, maybe 3. He went back inside, climbed the stairs. Quiet. Clara's door was open, a crack. Lamplight showing through. "I heard," she said through the gap. "It's old business. It always is." Morning came gray and humid. Morgan tried to work on the Widow Mason's chicken coop, but his hands wouldn't cooperate. Every measurement came out wrong. Every cut went crooked. His mind kept drifting to Colorado, to courtrooms, to $1,500 that might or might not exist at noon. He gave up and went to the livery stable. Hancock was shoeing a bay mare. The smell of hot metal and hoof-sharp in the air. "Need to check Biscuit's feet," Morgan said. "Did them yourself last week?" Morgan didn't answer, just went to Biscuit's stall. The mare nickered, pushing her soft nose into his chest. He ran his hands down her legs, checking for heat, for swelling, for any excuse to be here. "Heard you had a visitor last night." Hancock didn't look up from his work. "Jake Coulter. Remember him from the Colorado days." "You know Jake. Know of him." "Man's got a reputation for finding opportunities, other people's opportunities, mostly." Morgan picked up Biscuit's front hoof, examined it close. The shoe was fine, barely worn. "Also heard your lady's been working herself raw. Garden at dawn, Mrs. Templeton's in the afternoon, taking in mending at night." She's not my lady. Not yet. No? Hancock set down his hammer. Then what is she? Morgan didn't have an answer for that. Clara was something between stranger and wife, between hope and obligation. Jake wants me to go to Colorado, testify about an old claim. And you're thinking about it. There's money involved, maybe enough to... Morgan stopped. Enough to what by Clara's forgiveness when he left prove he could provide make this arrangement real? Let me ask you something. Hancock pulled out his pipe, the one his father had carved. You ever see a horse that's been broke wrong, taught to run instead of stand, to fear instead of trust? Sure. Can you retrain them? Sometimes. Takes patience. Takes more than that. Hancock lit his pipe, cherry tobacco smoke drifting up. Takes someone willing to stand still long enough for the horse to learn they won't run off. Morgan set down Biscuit's hoof. The mare lipped at his pocket, looking for the carrots he hadn't brought. I owe Jake money. You owe everybody something. Question is, who you planning to pay first? That evening, Morgan found his saddlebags under the bed. The leather was soft from years of use. Shaped to hold everything he owned, he pulled out shirts, laid them on the bed. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, razor, soap, a man's life in 2 leather pouches. His hands moved by themselves, fold, pack, tighten the straps. He'd done this so many times. Middle of the night in Kansas, dawn in Nebraska. That rushed afternoon in Colorado when everything fell apart. Clara's door opened down the hall, footsteps to the stairs, down to the kitchen. The pump handle squeaked. She was getting water. Morgan unpacked the shirts, hung them back in the wardrobe, packed them again. The leather straps knew his hands, the buckles worn smooth where his fingers worked them. Clara came back upstairs. Her footsteps stopped outside his door, the shadow of her feet visible in the gap underneath. She stood there 10 seconds, 20, then moved on to her room. Morgan sat on the bed, bags at his feet. $1,500, even if Jake took his share, even if the lawyers took theirs. He'd have enough. Enough to offer Clara something real. Enough to prove he could be more than a man with packed bags. The clock downstairs chimed 11, then midnight. Morgan pulled out paper and pencil, started a letter. Clara. He stopped. What could he say? That he'd be back, that she should wait, that this time was different from all the other times he'd left. He tried again. Clara. The money from Colorado could give us. When had there become an us? He crumpled the paper, started fresh. Clara, I have to what? Run, leave, disappoint her, like he'd disappointed everyone else. The door opened. No knock, no warning. Clara stood there in her wrapper and nightgown, hair in a braid down her back. Her eyes went straight to the packed bags. Sit! Her voice was flat as winter ice. This is how it ends. Clara, without even saying goodbye, just gone in the morning like smoke. It's not like that, isn't it? She stepped into the room, closed the door behind her. Improper, scandalous if anyone knew. But her face said she was past caring about proper. How much does he want? 200 plus interest. And if you don't pay, then I go to Colorado, testify, get my share of a settlement. Your share. She moved to the window, looked out at the dark street. There's always a share somewhere, isn't there? Always another claim, another chance, another reason to pack those bags. This is different. Harriet Morgan wanted to explain about the money, about building something real, about coming back. But the words died in his throat because he'd said them all before to other people in other towns. I knew, Clara said to the window, the moment I saw you on that platform, I knew you were a runner. It's in how you stand, one foot always pointed toward the door, how you keep your horse ready, How you pack neat and quick, like you've done it 1,000 times. Clara, I knew, and I came anyway. She turned to face him. Because I'm a runner too. Different kind, but still running. From my sister's grave, from my brother-in-law's pity, from being the spinster aunt who tends other people's children. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lye soap on her skin, see the red rims around her eyes. I thought maybe 2 runners could build something, like 2 broken boards that prop each other up. She laughed, short and bitter. Foolish. You're not foolish. No, I gave up everything for a 3-month maybe with a man who packs his bags the first time his past knocks on the door. I haven't left yet, but you will. She picked up one of his shirts from the bed, folded it proper, handed it to him. You will, because it's what you know, what you're good at. And I'll stay because it's what I know. And we'll both pretend this never happened. Clara, please, how much, what, how much is Jake offering from the claim? Maybe 1,500 if the lawyers don't take it all, if Jake's telling the truth, if the court rules fair. That's a lot of ifs. It's something. It's nothing. She moved to the door, hand on the knob. You know what I learned when my sister died? Plans are just prayers to a God who isn't listening. Money's just paper that burns. The only thing real is what you choose to do right now, today, in this moment. She opened the door, stepped into the hall. I chose you, she said, without turning around, even knowing what you are. I chose you. The door closed soft as a coffin lid. Morgan sat on the bed, packed bags at his feet, shirt in his hands. Through the wall, he heard Clara moving about her room, then silence, then soft but unmistakable, the sound of crying. Dawn came without Morgan sleeping. He sat at the window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale yellow, his packed bag still at his feet. Clara's crying had stopped around 3 o'clock, replaced by the kind of silence that felt heavier than sound. The roosters started up, first the Gonzalez's bird, then answers from across town. Morgan pulled on his boots, went downstairs quiet as he could. The kitchen stank of burned coffee. Mrs. Holloway must have left the pot on the stove overnight. He went out the back door, headed for the garden. Maybe he'd water the plants, show Clara he hadn't left yet, that he was still. The garden looked wrong even from a distance. The bean plants they'd staked 3 days ago were listing sideways, leaves gone yellow-brown. Morgan knelt beside them. The soil was bone dry, cracked like old leather. Neither of them had watered yesterday. Him, too distracted by Jake's visit. Her, too busy with work. Footsteps on the path. Clara appeared carrying an empty bucket, wearing her brown calico, hair pinned up proper for work. She looked at the dying plants, set down the bucket, knelt in the dirt. Her hands went to the first bean plant, pulled. The roots came free easy, too easy, dried out, white-brown like old bones. She shook the dirt off, set it aside, pulled the next one. My fault, Morgan said. No, mine. I knew better. She kept pulling, methodical. Each plant got the same treatment, pull, shake, set aside. You set them out too early in this heat. Should have waited. They worked in silence. Clara pulling plants, Morgan gathering them into a pile. The sun climbed, already hot at 6 in the morning. Sweat gathered under his collar, dripped onto the ruined plants. Can we replant? Too late in the season now. Clara moved to the tomatoes. These looked better, just wilted. These might make it if we water them today. I'll fetch water. You'll be on the stage to Colorado. Morgan stopped. I haven't decided. Haven't you? She stood, hands on her hips, dirt streaking her apron. Those bags don't pack themselves." They walked back to the boarding house. Mrs. Holloway had breakfast, going biscuits and gravy, coffee that smelled fresh this time. Clara washed her hands at the pump, came to the table, sat across from Morgan, same seats as that first night. "Tell me about the debt," she said, cutting her biscuit precise. "What about it? The real amount. Not what Jake says. What do you remember?" Morgan pushed gravy around his plate. 200 for supplies. When the claim looked promising, we needed timber for shoring, tools, provisions for 3 months. "And you signed a paper." "Had to. No one would extend credit without collateral." "What was the collateral?" Morgan's throat went tight. "My share of the claim. So if you don't pay, Jake gets my share anyway. Either way, he wins." Clara sipped her coffee, set the cup down exact in its saucer. "My sister's hospital bills were $47. The funeral was another 15. The doctor wanted payment immediate. Clara, my brother-in-law paid, said it was family obligation. Then his new wife arrived and made it clear that obligation had limits. She spread butter on her biscuit, every motion controlled. I worked 4 months to pay him back. Washing, mending, tending the children without wages, cleared the debt the day before I left. That's different." "Is it a debt's a debt?" She looked at him straight on. "I have $37 saved. It's yours if you want it." The offer hit Morgan like a physical blow. "I can't take your money." "Why not?" "You're planning to leave anyway. Might as well leave me with nothing." "That's not. I would never." "Wouldn't you?" She pulled out her small leather purse, counted bills onto the table. 30, 35, 37, everything I have. The bills lay between them, soft and worn. Some had been folded so many times the numbers were barely visible. Morgan could see writing on someone's account figures in pencil. How much would this reduce Jake's hold? Morgan's mind worked the math. With 37 off the principal, might knock the interest down some. Maybe owe 160, 170 instead of 200. And if you pay him that from your Colorado share, if there is a share. Yes, if. Clara pushed the money toward him. "Take it." "No." "Then what?" Her voice cracked. "You leave. Jake hounds you forever. You stay. He makes trouble here. What's your plan, Morgan?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" She laughed, bitter. 3 years. You've been running from this debt, and you don't know." She stood, left the money on the table, went to the stove for more coffee. Her hand shook pouring it. Coffee slopped onto the floor. "My sister was pregnant 7 times. She said to the stove, lost 2 babies. Each time she got weaker. I begged her not to try again, but her husband wanted sons, and she wanted to please him." She turned around, leaning against the counter. "The last pregnancy. She knew something was wrong, told me she could feel it, like darkness growing inside her. But the doctor said she was hysterical. Her husband said she worried too much. Everyone knew better than her about her own body." Clara came back to the table, sat down hard. "She died screaming. 3 days of labor before her body gave out. The baby lived 2 hours. She picked up one of the bills, smoothed it flat, and 6 weeks later, her husband had a new wife, younger, stronger, better suited for birthing sons. Clara, I'm sorry. I don't want sorry. I want to know if you're staying or going." Morgan looked at this woman across from him, this stranger who'd offered everything she had to help him with a debt that wasn't hers. The morning light through the window caught the threads of brown in her dark hair, the small scar on her left hand, the determined set of her jaw. "What would you do in my place?" "I'd face it. Here, now. Tell Jake to take the 37 or take nothing." "He won't accept that." "Then let him try to collect." She leaned forward. "What's he going to do? Take you by force, drag you to Colorado in chains?" "He could make trouble. Talk to people. ruin my reputation here. What reputation? You're a drifter who advertised for a wife. I'm a desperate spinster who answered, we're already the talk of the town. She was right. Morgan knew she was right. But knowing and doing were different animals. I need to think. No, you need to choose. Clara stood, gathered the money, put it back in her purse. I have to go to work. Mrs. Templeton has letters. She moved to the door, stopped. The tomatoes need water. Every plant, base and leaves both. They're dying, but might be saved if someone acts now. Clara, choose. Morgan, pack those bags and get on that stage. Or unpack them and face whatever comes. But choose. After Clara left, Morgan sat at the table, staring at the coffee going cold. Mrs. Holloway came in, looked at him, said nothing, just cleared the plates and started on the dishes, humming some hymn under her breath. Morgan went upstairs, stood in his room looking at the packed bags, his whole life in 2 leather pouches. He picked them up, tested the weight, light enough to carry easy, heavy enough to hold him down. Through the window, he could see the garden. The tomato plants were visibly wilting, leaves curled in on themselves. Another hour in this heat, and they'd be past saving. He could see Clara walking toward the banker's house, her back straight despite everything. She'd work all day writing letters for Mrs. Templeton, come home, do mending by lamplight. Tomorrow she'd do it again and again, building something penny by penny, day by day. Morgan set down the bags, went downstairs, filled 2 buckets at the pump. The water was cold from deep underground, shocking against his sun-warm hands. He carried them to the garden, began watering the tomatoes, base first, soaking the roots, then the leaves, gentle, washing off the dust. The plants seemed to perk up almost immediately, leaves uncurling toward the sun, not dead yet, not if he kept watering, kept tending, kept choosing to stay. Well now, Morgan turned. Jake Coulter stood at the garden gate, clean-shaved, wearing his good suit, the one he wore to court. Thought you'd be packing, Jake said. Thought wrong. Jake entered the garden, careful not to dirty his polished boots. Stage leaves in 2 hours. I know. You coming? Morgan poured the last of the water on a struggling tomato plant. Depends. On what? On whether you'll take $37 against the debt. Jake's face went still. 37? That's insulting. It's what I have. No, it's what she has. Jake smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. Your woman gave you her savings. How touching. Morgan set down the empty bucket. Take it or leave it. Oh, I'll leave it, and I'll take you to Colorado, willing or not. How do you figure? Jake pulled out a folded paper. Sheriff in Denver gave me this. Writ of debt collection, all legal and proper. Morgan looked at the paper. Official seal. His name in typed letters. Real enough to cause real trouble. So, here's what happens, Jake said, smooth as oil. You come willing, testify, get your share, pay me off, or I take this to your sheriff here, have you arrested for debt, drag you to Colorado anyway, your choice. Chip Morgan heard footsteps on the path. Clara, coming back, she'd forgotten something, or Mrs. Templeton didn't need her, or she appeared around the corner, saw Jake, stopped. Miss Thornton. Jake touched his hat. We were just discussing travel arrangements. Clara looked at Morgan, a question in her eyes. Morgan looked at the dying garden, the woman who'd offered everything, the man who'd take it all. Time to choose. Morgan picked up the empty water bucket, turned it over, sat on it. The metal rim bit into his legs through his pants. He looked up at Jake, then at Clara, then back at the tomato plants fighting to live. Mrs. Templeton didn't need me this morning, Clara said, coming into the garden. Seems her husband had words with her about hiring help without consulting him. Jake's smile widened. That's unfortunate. Work's hard to find for a woman with no references. I have references, Clara said. From who? A dead sister, a brother-in-law who remarried quick. Jake pulled out his tobacco pouch. Face it, Miss Thornton, you're both at the end of your ropes. Might as well accept the lifeline I'm offering. Morgan watched Jake's fingers work the tobacco, same as they'd worked 3 years ago when he talked Morgan into the claim. Same easy movements, same reasonable tone, same poison dressed up as help. Show me the writ again, Morgan said. Jake handed it over, smirking. Morgan read it, careful, every word. Denver court seal, judge's signature. But the amount, this said $150. Jake's fingers paused on his cigarette. Plus interest. Interest isn't listed. Legal writs list everything. Morgan handed it back. You had this drawn up for the original amount. No interest calculated. Details. Law is details. Morgan stood, the bucket clanging as it tipped. Here's my offer. $50 now. $100 when I can earn it. No Colorado trip. That's barely a third. It's a third more than you'll get if I disappear. Morgan moved closer to Jake, close enough to smell the pomade in his hair. And we both know I can disappear. Done it before. If Jake's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter, you wouldn't leave your woman. She's not my woman. Just a 3-month arrangement. 2 months and 2 weeks left. Morgan kept his voice flat. I've walked away from more for less. Clara made a small sound. Morgan didn't look at her. $50, Morgan repeated. Today, or I'm gone tonight. And you can try collecting from empty air. Jake lit his cigarette, took a long draw. The smoke drifted across the garden, gray-blue in the morning sun. Where are you going to get $50? That's my problem. No, that's your woman's problem. Jake turned to Clara. Because he doesn't have 50 cents, much less $50. Unless you give it to him. Clara walked to the tomato plants, began checking the ones Morgan had watered. Her fingers tested the leaves, the soil, the stems, taking inventory of what might be saved. Mr. Coulter, she said without turning around, are you a married man? What's that got to do with anything? Just curious? A man who understands women wouldn't make the mistake you're making. What mistake is that? Clara faced him. Thinking I'm weak because I'm alone. Thinking I'm desperate because I came here on an advertisement. Thinking I'll fold because you're pressing. She walked to Morgan, stood beside him, not touching, but close enough he could feel the heat from her skin. $50, she said. We can have it by tonight. Jake laughed. You got that much hidden in your petticoats? No, but this is a small town. People talk. They also help, when asked right. Nobody's going to help a mail-order bride and a drifter. We'll see. Clara turned to Morgan. The Lutheran Church needs those pews fixed. That's $20 if you can do it this week. Henderson needs new shelves in his barber shop. That's another 10. That's 30, not 50. Mrs. Mueller wants help with inventory. $5. Mrs. Gonzalez needs someone to watch her children while she helps her sister birth a baby. $3. Clara kept counting on her fingers. The hotel needs their kitchen tables reinforced. Mr. Garrett wants new saddle racks. Morgan's head spun with the math. That's maybe 45, if they all pay prompt. Then we'll find another 5. Clara looked at Jake straight on. By 6 o'clock tonight, cash money. Jake dropped his cigarette, ground it under his heel. The smell of crushed tobacco mixed with the garden dirt. You've got until 6, 1 minute late, and it's the full 200 of Colorado. He walked away, whistling. The same tune from the war, one the Confederate soldiers sang before battle. Morgan remembered it from his father's stories. Clara waited until Jake was out of sight, then sank onto the overturned bucket. Her hands shook in her lap. $45 in one day. She said, might as well be 400. Why did you say we could do it? Because backing down is acceptance. She looked up at him. My sister accepted everything. Where did it get her? The Lutheran church smelled of beeswax and old wood. Reverend Fisher, a thin man who looked like he'd been stretched on a rack, showed Morgan the damaged pews. 3 of them. Backs split from age and hard use. Can you fix them today? If I work straight through. $20 is all we budgeted. 20's fair. Morgan set to work, removing the damaged backs first. The wood was pine, aged hard as iron, so his saw blade kept binding. Sweat dripped onto the church floor. Each dropped dark on the swept boards. Clara appeared at noon with water and cornbread. Henderson says $10 for the shelves, but he wants them tomorrow. Mrs. Mueller will pay $5 for inventory if I can start now. That's $35. I know. She handed him the water jar. Keep working. The afternoon crawled. Morgan's hands cramped around the tools. His back streamed from bending over the pews. But each board he cut, each joint he fitted, was $5 closer to freedom, or something like it. By 4 o'clock, 2 pews were done. The third was fighting him. The wood split wrong. The joints wouldn't match. Reverend Fisher came to check progress. Beautiful work, he said, running his hand along the repaired backs. You've got your father's talent. Morgan stopped mid-saw. You knew my father. James Wade did the altar rails here, back in '78, before the drought. Fisher pointed to the front of the church. See, same careful joints you're making. Morgan looked at the altar rails. He'd never noticed. But there it was, his father's way of cutting wood, the slight angle that made joints stronger. He was proud of you, Fisher said. Talked about his boy learning the trade. Then he lost everything. He lost land, not everything. Hedge Fisher touched the altar rail. This remains. Your work on these pews will remain long after debts are paid and forgotten. The Reverend left. Morgan went back to the stubborn third pew. Saw it different now. Not just wood to cut for money, but something that would outlast him. He slowed down, took more care. The joint fitted perfect on the third try. Clara returned at 5:30. Face flushed from running. I have $43. She pulled bills from her purse, counting fat. The Mueller inventory. Henderson paid advance. Mrs. Gonzalez gave $3 for tomorrow's child-minding and Mrs. Pritchard. Clara's voice held wonder. She gave $5. Said she needed washing done but wouldn't have time to supervise until next week. Mrs. Pritchard helped, she said. Clara paused, choosing words careful. She said she knew about debts, about men who hold them over women's heads. Morgan fitted the last board into place. The pew back was solid now, stronger than before. That's 43. We need 7 more. 6:30. Jake's voice from the church door. I said 6 o'clock. Morgan turned. Jake stood backlit by evening sun, sheriff beside him. The actual sheriff, star on his vest, hand resting on his pistol. You're late with the payment, Jake said. Sheriff Daniels is here to enforce the writ. It's not 6 yet, Clara said. Church clock hasn't chimed. My watch says different. Jake pulled out his pocket watch, gold thing that had belonged to his father. 6:02. Sheriff Daniels shifted uncomfortable. Jake, if the church clock hasn't, a debt is a debt. Time's up. That's when the church clock began to chime. Deep bronze notes, counting out the hour. 1, 2, 3. Morgan counted each strike, heart hammering against his ribs. 4, 5. The 6th chime rang out, echoing through the church. There, Jake said. 6 o'clock, but where's my money? Clara poured the bills onto the pew Morgan had just repaired. $43 in worn bills, some stained with coffee, some soft as cloth. We need a few more minutes, she said. Time's up. Jake nodded to the sheriff. Arrest him. Sheriff Daniels sighed. Jake, be reasonable. I've been reasonable for 3 years. Jake's voice went hard. Either he pays now, in full, or he comes with us. The church door opened again. Tom Garrett entered, followed by Mrs. Holloway, Mrs. Mueller, and half a dozen others. The Gonzalez family. Henderson with shaving soap still on his jaw, even Mrs. Pritchard, standing stiff-backed in her Sunday dress. Evening, Jake, Garrett said. Heard there was some business being conducted. Private business? Nothing's private in this town. Mrs. Mueller stepped forward. Mr. Wade fixed our pump last week. Didn't charge anything. He helped me with my roof, Henderson added. No payment asked. One by one, they spoke up. Small jobs Morgan had done, favors he'd forgotten. Each person pulled out money, $1 here, $2 there. They placed the bills on the pew beside Clara's 43. Morgan counted as the pile grew, 50, 55, 62. $62, Clara announced. More than agreed. Jake's face had gone red as fresh beef. This isn't, you can't. Take it, Sheriff Daniels said quiet. It's more than fair. Jake grabbed the money, counted it twice. His hand shook, making the bills flutter. This isn't over. Yes, it is. And Clara picked up the extra $12, handed them back to the townspeople. Mr. Calder got his 50, more than he deserved. Jake stormed out, boots hitting the floor hard enough to echo. Sheriff Daniels tipped his hat to the assembled crowd and followed. The church stood quiet. Then Mrs. Pritchard spoke. Mr. Wade, those pews look sturdy. We'll expect to see you both on Sunday to test them proper. She left, others following. Each nodded to Morgan and Clara as they passed, not warm, exactly, but acknowledging. They'd stood up for them. That meant something. Clara and Morgan were left alone in the church, evening light slanting through the windows, painting everything gold. Thank you, Morgan said. For what? For fighting, for finding a way. We're not done yet. Clara gathered the tools, practical even now. Jake won't leave easy. Men like him never do. She was right. Through the window, Morgan could see Jake standing outside the hotel, talking animated to someone, planning something. What now? Clara asked. Morgan looked at her, this woman who'd rallied a town for him, who'd spent her last dollar, who'd stood beside him when running would have been easier. Now I ask you something I should have asked proper from the start. Morgan woke before dawn, his mind already working. The packed bags sat where he'd left them 3 days ago, still ready. But something had shifted. The leather looked foreign now, like relics from another man's life. He dressed in his good shirt, the one Clara had washed and pressed without being asked. His father's collar pin, tarnished but whole, took 3 tries to fasten. His hands wouldn't steady. The boarding house was silent. Even the roosters hadn't started yet. Morgan went downstairs, boots careful on the steps that liked to creak. He needed to speak to Reverend Fisher before the town woke up. The walk to the church felt longer in the pre-dawn darkness. Stars were fading, the eastern sky going from black to deep blue. A meadowlark called somewhere, that liquid note that meant morning coming. The church door stood open. Fisher was already there, preparing for early prayer service. He looked up from arranging hymn books. Didn't seem surprised to see Morgan. Mr. Wade, early for Sunday service? It's Saturday, Reverend. So it is. Fisher set down the hymnal. What can I do for you? Morgan's throat felt full of sand. I need to arrange something. For this afternoon, if you're available. A wedding? If she'll have me. Fisher studied him long enough that Morgan wanted to fidget like a schoolboy. Miss Thornton seems a sensible woman. She is. And you Are you sensible? Morgan thought about packed bags. 3 years running, debts that followed like shadows. I'm learning to be. Learning? Fisher moved to the altar, ran his hand along the rail Morgan's father had built. Your father stood here once, asking the same thing. Said he wasn't sure he was ready for marriage. But he was sure about your mother. He never told me that. Men don't talk about uncertainty. They talk about crops and weather and horse. Fisher pulled out his appointment book. 3 o'clock. If she agrees, she will. The Reverend made a note. A woman who'd face down Jake Coulter won't balk at marriage. Morgan left the church as the sun broke the horizon. The prairie grass went gold all at once. Like someone had poured honey across the land. He needed flowers, not town flowers from somebody's garden, but prairie flowers. The kind that grew wild, survived drought, came back every spring without anybody tending them. He walked out past the cemetery, past the last fence posts, to where the land rolled gentle toward the creek. Indian paintbrush grew in patches, red-orange like sunset. Prairie roses, pink and small but sweet-smelling. Black-eyed Susans nodding in the breeze that always picked up with sunrise. His mother had taught him about flowers when he was young. Each one means something, she'd said. Roses for love, daisies for innocence. But these prairie flowers meant something different. They meant surviving, adapting, hanging on when everything said let go. Morgan gathered them careful, stems long enough to hold together. No ribbon to tie them. He used prairie grass, braiding it the way his mother had shown him. The bouquet looked rough, nothing like the pictures in ladies' magazines, but it smelled like morning and earth and things that lasted. By the time he got back to town, it was past 7. The boarding house kitchen smelled of coffee and biscuit dough. Clara was at the table, mending one of Mrs. Holloway's tablecloths. Her needle moved steady through the fabric, tiny stitches that would hold. She looked up, saw the flowers in his hand. Her needle stopped. "Those are nice," she said, careful. "They're for you." She set down the mending, took the bouquet. Her fingers found the Indian paintbrush, touched the petals light as breath. "My mother loved these, said they looked like God dipped a brush in sunset." "Clara, I need to ask you something." "All right." Morgan had practiced words on the walk back, about partnership and building something and staying put. But looking at her now, hair coming loose from its pins, fingers stained purple from the berries she'd been preserving, eyes tired but steady. All the words seemed too small. "I'm not good at this," he started. "At what?" "Staying, choosing, being more than what I've been." Clara set the flowers on the table, careful not to break the grass binding. "Nobody's asking you to be more. You are. Just by being here, by not running when Jake showed up, by spending your last dollar on a stranger's debt." Morgan moved closer, caught the smell of her lye soap and blackberry jam and something underneath. That was just Clara. "You make me want to be someone who stays." "Want isn't enough." "No, but it's a start." He pulled out the crumpled paper from his pocket, his half of their agreement, the one she'd given back to him. "This says 3 months trial. I want to tear it up." "Why?" "Because I don't want a trial. I want permanent. I want to wake up knowing you're across the hall. I want to plant gardens that we'll harvest together. I want—" He stopped, took a breath. "I want to marry you today, now, before I lose my nerve or Jake comes back or something else goes wrong." Clara stood, came around the table. Close enough he could see the small scar on her chin, the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "You're Sarah," she said, "terrified. Of what? That I'll fail you, like I failed at mining, at farming, at everything I've tried." "Maybe." She touched his hand, just her fingertips on his knuckles. "But maybe we fail better together than alone." "Is that a yes?" That's a question. Are you asking me to marry you because Jake scared you? Because the town helped us? Because you feel obligated? No. Morgan caught her hand, held it proper. Her fingers were rough, strong, real. I'm asking because when I think about leaving, my chest gets tight. Because when you smile really smuts, not the polite one, something in me unclenches. Because you see me clear and choose to stay anyway. Clara looked at their joined hands. I'm not an easy woman, Morgan. I've got sharp edges from too much disappointment. I don't trust easy. Don't forgive quick. Don't believe in fairy tales. I'm not offering a fairy tale. I'm offering work. Building something day by day, board by board, maybe fighting sometimes, maybe failing sometimes, but not running. Promise. I can't promise I won't want to run. Can only promise I won't. Clara laughed, short and surprised. That's the most honest thing you've said. Is it enough? She squeezed his hand. Get cleaned up. You've got dirt under your nails and flower stems in your hair. Can't marry you looking like you've been wrestling prairie dogs. You'll marry me. 3 o'clock. You said better tell Mrs. Holloway. She'll want to make something special. The rest of the morning moved like a dream. Morgan washed, shaved careful, put on his good clothes. His hands shook buttoning his shirt. Tom Garrett showed up with pomade for his hair. Wouldn't take payment. Henderson brought a borrowed tie. Even Jake appeared in the doorway, cleaner than yesterday, almost sober. Heard you're getting hitched, Jake said. Word travels. I want to witness. Morgan turned from the mirror. Why? Because I've known you 7 years. Never seen you stand still for anything. Jake pulled out a flask, took a pull, offered it. Morgan declined. Besides, I feel partly responsible. If I hadn't shown up, you'd still be dancing around each other. We were doing fine. No, you were doing careful. There's a difference. Jake pocketed the flask. I'll be at the church. Afternoon came hot and still. The church felt cooler. All that stone holding the night's chill. A handful of people had gathered Mrs. Holloway in her best black dress. The Gonzalez family scrubbed clean. Miss Mueller clutching a handkerchief already damp. Morgan stood at the altar his father's hands had built, waiting. The wood felt smooth under his palm, worn by decades of other hands, other promises. Clara entered through the side door. She wore this great dress from the stage, but she'd added something white lace at the collar and cuffs, borrowed or bought. He couldn't tell. Her hair was pinned up neat, but she'd tucked one of the prairie roses behind her ear. She carried his rough bouquet like it was roses from a greenhouse. She walked to him steady, no hesitation. When she reached the altar, she handed the flowers to Mrs. Holloway, took Morgan's hands. Her fingers were steady. His were not. Dearly beloved, Fisher began. The words washed over Morgan without sticking. He was too aware of Clara's hands in his, the way sunlight through the window caught the red in her hair, the small smile playing at her mouth corners. Do you, Morgan James Wade, take this woman? Yes. I haven't finished. Yes to all of it. Laughter rippled through the witnesses. Clara squeezed his hands. Fisher continued, patient. When Clara's turn came, she answered clear and strong, Casita. No hesitation, no doubt. Just, I do like stating a fact. The ring? Morgan's stomach dropped. He'd forgotten no money for a ring. No time till Clara pulled something from her pocket. A man's ring. Simple gold band, worn thin. This was my father's. If it fits. Morgan tried it. Too big for his ring finger, but it fit his middle finger perfect. I'll get you one when I can. I don't need a ring. She held up her left hand, showed a piece of braided grass tied around her finger from the bouquet binding. This'll do. You may kiss the bride. Morgan leaned in, careful, aware of the watching eyes. Clara grabbed his shirt front, pulled him closer, kissed him like she meant it, like sealing something more than vows. Jake whistled loud. Mrs. Holloway cried into her handkerchief. The Gonzalez children giggled. They signed the register with Fisher's pen, ink fresh and permanent. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan Wade, legal, binding, real, outside the church. The afternoon sun hit like a slap. Jake was passing his flask around, even Mrs. Pritchard taking a small sip. "Never thought I'd see it," Jake said, pumping Morgan's hand. "You married? Settled. Respectable? Don't know about respectable. Give it time." Jake turned to Clara. "You've got your work cut out. This one's been running since he could walk." "I'm good at repairs," Clara said. Jake laughed. Real laughter this time. "I believe you are." He pulled Morgan aside, spoke low. "That debt's clear. All of it. Wedding gift. Jake, don't make me take it back." Jake straightened his hat. "I'm heading out tomorrow. California still calling. Good luck." "Don't need luck. Got charm." Jake winked at Clara. "Take care of him, Mrs. Wade. He's the best of us, even if he don't know it." Jake walked away, whistling that same tune. This time, it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like goodbye. Mrs. Holloway insisted on a wedding supper. Nothing. Fancy cold chicken, pickled vegetables, a cake that was really cornbread with blackberry jam between the layers. The boarding house dining room filled with people Morgan hadn't expected. Reverend Fisher, Sheriff Daniels, even Mrs. Pritchard, who ate one small piece of cake and declared it adequate. As evening came on, people drifted away. Chores to do, animals to tend, life continuing around this momentary celebration. Clara and Morgan were left in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. Married work, ordinary, perfect. "Where do we go now?" Clara asked, hands deep in soapy water. Morgan hadn't thought that far. They were married, but they still had separate rooms at the boarding house, couldn't afford their own place yet. "I suppose—" A knock at the door, sharp, urgent, Sheriff Daniels' voice. "Morgan, need you to come quick." Morgan opened the door. The sheriff's face was grim. "There's been an accident. Jake Coulter. His horse spooked. Threw him. He's asking for you." The doctor's office smelled of carbolic acid and whiskey, medicine, and pain medicine mixed together. Jake lay on the examination table. His left leg twisted wrong, boot still on because the doctor was afraid to remove it. His face had gone gray as old dishwater, sweat beading along his hairline. "Morgan!" Jake's voice came out rough. "Good. Need a witness." Dr. Hammond, a young man from Baltimore who'd come west for his lungs, worked careful around Jake's leg. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "Got to talk." Jake grabbed Morgan's hand, grip still strong despite the pain. "Horse went down a ravine. My fault, pushed too hard, too fast. Story of my life. Jake, listen." Jake's fingers dug into Morgan's palm. "My saddlebags. There's papers in them. The Colorado claim. The real judgment, not 1,500. Dustin, 3,000. Your half." Morgan's chest went tight. "You said—" "I lied. Planned to take it all, leave you the debt." Jake coughed, winced. "But seeing you today, married, settled, you did what I never could. Stopped running." The doctor poured chloroform onto a cloth. "This'll help with the pain." "Wait." Jake fumbled in his vest pocket, pulled out a folded document. "Sign this. Makes you beneficiary. Case I don't in the case." Morgan took the paper. Legal writing, Jake's signature already at the bottom. A simple statement, transferring claim rights. "Jake, you're going to be fine. Maybe, maybe not. Sign it." Morgan signed it. His hand shook, making his signature crooked. Hammond pressed the chloroform cloth over Jake's nose and mouth. Jake's eyes fluttered closed, his grip on Morgan's hand loosening. "Will he—" Morgan couldn't finish the question. The leg's bad. Might have to come off. The doctor began cutting away Jake's pants. You should go. This isn't something you want to see. Morgan left, but not before taking Jake's saddlebags from the corner. Outside, Clara waited on the bench Sheriff Daniels had brought from the jail. Her wedding dress, the gray traveling dress, had dust on the hem. How is he? Bad. Maybe dying. Clara stood, took his arm. Then we pray. They walked back to the boarding house in silence. The celebration debris was still scattered around plates with cake crumbs, coffee cups half full, their wedding day. Turned sideways by Jake's accident, Morgan set the saddlebags on the kitchen table, opened them careful. Papers, as Jake had said. The Colorado judgment, signed and sealed. $3,000 to be divided between Jake Coulter and Morgan Wade. The other partners deceased or signed away. $3,000, Clara said quiet. $1,500 each. If Jake lives, all of it if he doesn't. Don't say that. Clara touched the papers. Blood money, either way. 3 days, Jake lingered. The leg came off below the knee. Dr. Hammond working through the night, while Morgan held Jake down and Clara boiled instruments. The boarding house became a makeshift hospital, folks taking turns sitting with him. On the 4th day, Jake woke clear-headed. Still here, he said to Morgan. Where else would I be? California, Colorado, anywhere but watching me die slow. You're not dying. No. Jake looked at where his leg should be, the flat blanket below his knee. What do you call this? Living different. Jake laughed, then groaned. You really have gone respectable. Clara brought broth, spooned it into Jake's mouth like feeding a child. He accepted it, too weak to protest. When she left, Jake grabbed Morgan's wrist. The money, take it. All of it, half's yours. What am I going to do with it? Can't ride, can't work, can't run anymore. Jake's eyes went wet. I'm done. Morgan, take the money, pishpoo, and build something, have kids. Do what I can't. You could stay. Town needs a clerk, someone who can read and write legal documents. Me. In an office. Jake tried to laugh, started coughing instead. When he stopped, blood specked his lips. We both know I won't last the month. He was wrong. Jake lasted 6 weeks, long enough to see Morgan and Clara move into a rented house on the north side of town, long enough to watch them plant a fall garden, long enough to stand as witness leaning on crutches. Dr. Hammond had fashioned when Morgan bought the empty lot behind their house. Jake died on a Tuesday morning in September. Quiet as smoke dissipating, Morgan found him in the boarding house room, looking peaceful for maybe the first time in his life. The whole town came to the funeral. Even Mrs. Pritchard, who declared that, despite his rough ways, Mr. Coulter showed Christian charity at the end. They buried him next to Morgan's mother's cousin, the only family connection either of them had in Texas. September arrived with cooler mornings and cricket songs. The garden Clara had replanted in July was producing steady tomatoes, beans, squash, more than they could eat. She sold the excess at Saturday market, 50 cents here, $1 there. Building something penny by penny. Morgan worked every day now. Word had spread about his carpentry, how he'd fixed the church pews stronger than new. Orders came steady shelves, chairs, a cradle for the Gonzalez's new baby. Their rented house wasn't much 2 rooms and a kitchen. Tin roof that leaked in the corner when rain came sideways. But Clara had made curtains from feed sacks, and Morgan had built shelves for her preserving jars. And it looked like home, felt like home. The last Sunday in September came warm and clear. They'd invited the Gonzalez's for dinner, payment for help with the harvest. Clara cooked all morning chicken and dumplings, green beans with bacon, cornbread with honey butter. The kitchen smelled like Morgan's childhood. Before the drought, before the running. Table's too small, Clara said, looking at the rough pine table Morgan had built. I'll make a bigger one. When we need it. Clara's hand went to her stomach, quick gesture she'd been making lately. Might be sooner than later. Morgan set down the plate he'd been holding. Are you? Think so? Mrs. Gonzalez thinks so too. Clara kept her eyes on the table. March, maybe April. The room went quiet, except for the pot bubbling on the stove. Morgan couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the word echoing in his head. Father, father, father. Say something, Clara said. Morgan crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, pulled her close. She smelled like flour and chicken stock and home. We'll need a cradle. You already built one for the Gonzalezes. Theirs is pine. Ours will be oak. He pulled back, looked at her face. Are you happy? Scared? Happy? Both. She touched his cheek. You're crying. Morgan hadn't realized. He wiped his face, laughed. My mother always said tears at good news meant the heart was too full for the body to hold. The Gonzalezes arrived before they could say more. 7 people crowded around the small table, children on makeshift benches, everyone talking at once in English and Spanish mixed together. Mrs. Gonzalez had brought flan, wobbling perfect on a cracked plate. After dinner, the men sat on the porch while the women cleaned up. Mr. Gonzalez smoked his pipe, sweet tobacco mixing with the evening air. You've done good here, Gonzalez said. The garden, the house, the wife. Still renting the house? For now. But you'll buy. Man with a child coming, he puts down roots deep. Through the window, Morgan could see Clara washing dishes, laughing at something Mrs. Gonzalez said. Her hands moved steady through the soapy water, working even while happy. Never thought I'd be here, Morgan said, where, not running, not planning the next escape, just here. Gonzalez nodded slow. My grandfather said something once. A man runs until he finds something worth stopping for. Looks like you found it. The evening stretched on, comfortable. Children played in the yard, catching fireflies in mason jars. The women came out to the porch, Clara bringing coffee, Mrs. Gonzalez settling her youngest on her lap. Next week we harvest the corn, Gonzalez said. Could use help. I'll be there, Morgan said. And week after, the Hendersons need help with their barn raising. I'll be there. And in spring, Gonzalez smiled. In spring, you'll be busy with your own harvest. Clara's hand found Morgan's shoulder, rested there light as a bird. He reached up, covered her hand with his. Her wedding ring still that piece of grass, though he'd offered to buy gold pressed against his palm. Tell them, she said quiet. Tell us what? Mrs. Gonzalez leaned forward. March, Clara said. Maybe April. Mrs. Gonzalez erupted in Spanish, kissing Clara's cheeks, calling blessings down from God and all the saints. The children wanted to know what the fuss was about. Mr. Gonzalez poured drinks from a bottle he produced from somewhere, even giving the older children tiny sips. To new life, he toasted. They drank. Morgan whispered, Thank you, Lord, before sipping the liquor burning warm down his throat. Later, after the Gonzalezes left, Morgan and Clara sat alone on their porch. The crickets were loud. That end of summer sound that meant change coming. But not bad change, just change. You never told me, Clara said. Are you happy about the baby? Morgan thought about Jake, dead 6 days now, about his father, dead these 8 years, about all the running, all the leaving, all the almost that never quite were. I'm terrified, he said, but happy, but happy. He pulled her closer. I never thought, after Colorado, after everything, I never thought I'd have this. What's this? Morgan gestured at the garden, heavy with produce. The house, small, but theirs for now. The woman beside him, growing their child. The town beyond, where people knew their names, expected them at church, counted on them. Home, Leptus, he said. This is home. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. Took you long enough to recognize it. I'm a slow learner, but steady, she said, echoing her words from months ago. Slow and steady. The stars came out one by one. Venus first, bright in the west, then the others, filling in the sky like promises kept. Morgan found the Big Dipper, the one Clara called Ursa Major. Same stars, different names, like him, same man. But husband now, father soon. We should go in, Clara said. Early morning tomorrow. In a minute. They sat there, holding on to the day's last light. Somewhere a train whistle sounded, heading east or west, carrying people toward whatever they were chasing. Once that sound would have made Morgan's feet itch, made him think about tickets and destinations and anywhere but here. Now it was just noise in the distance. Background to this life he was building, board by board, day by day, with this woman who'd taught him that staying still took more courage than running ever did. Morgan? Yeah, the baby. If it's a boy, James, Morgan said without hesitation, after my father. And if it's a girl, Morgan thought about it. Hope, he said finally, because that's what she'll be. Clara squeezed his hand. Hope Wade. I like it. They went inside then, closing the door on September, on the crickets, on the world beyond their walls. Morgan barred the door from habit, though there was nothing to fear. Clara banked the stove, though the night was warm enough without it. They went to bed in the room they shared now, narrow bed that creaked when either moved. Clara curved against him, her back to his chest, his hand on her stomach where their child grew. Tell me we'll be all right, she whispered in the darkness. We'll be all right. Promise. I promise we'll try. Every day we'll try. That's enough, she said, and her breathing slowed toward sleep. Morgan stayed awake longer, listening to Clara's breathing, to the house settling, to the world outside continuing its turn. He thought about Jake, about debts paid and choices made, about seeds planted and seeds growing, about tomorrow, when he'd wake in this bed, in this house, with this woman, and choose to stay all over again. The choosing never ended. That was the secret. Every morning, every breath, every moment was a choice. Run or stay. Fear or faith. Alone or together. Tonight, like every night since that day at the depot, he chose day, chose faith, chose together. And for the first time in his running life, that choice felt easy as breathing, natural as sunrise, sure as the seasons turning, bringing harvest and hope and home, connecting hearts. My friend, I've told you Morgan and Clara's story because I see something of myself in their hesitation, their doubt, their careful hope. We all carry packed bags in our hearts, ready to run when life presses too close. But sometimes, blessed times, we find someone who makes staying worth the risk. Not because they promise easy, but because they promise real. I think of them often when September comes around, when the crickets sing their end of summer songs. They remind me that home isn't found by searching wider circles. It's built by choosing the same small circle, day after day, until the choosing becomes as natural as breathing. That's the miracle. Really, not the grand gesture, but the small, repeated yes. Disclaimer. This story is a work of historical fiction inspired by the American frontier experience of the 80s, created solely for entertainment purposes. This narrative does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence, abandonment, or harmful behavior. All characters and events depicted are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or actual historical events is purely coincidental. The story aims to explore universal themes of commitment, resilience, and community. through the lens of frontier life.